We are at a lavish Roman banquet, a scene of immense wealth and power. A senator, wishing to display his status, takes a small, intricately carved silver piperadium and carefully sprinkles a few tiny black specks onto his meal. These are peppercorns. Today, they are the most common spice on Earth, but in ancient Rome, they were black gold, a luxury commodity so valuable they were sometimes used to count out a fortune, grain by single grain. Each one of those peppercorns had completed an epic 4,000-mile journey from the coast of India, a voyage that was, for centuries, considered impossible. How did this humble spice become an imperial obsession? The answer lies not on any road, but in a secret hidden in plain sight, a revolutionary discovery that turned the open ocean from a terrifying void into a highway of wind. To understand the birth of the global economy, we must look beyond the dusty overland Silk Road and turn our gaze south to the vast blue expanse of the Indian Ocean. For millennia, this was a fragmented and dangerous world. Its trade was a slow, timid, and laborious process of coastal crawling, with small ships inching their way along the shoreline from one port to the next, a journey from Egypt to India that could take years. The entire network was controlled by a series of powerful middlemen, particularly the Arab kingdoms of southern Arabia, who jealously guarded the routes and sold the exotic goods of the East to the Roman world at an astronomical markup. The open ocean was an unsolved puzzle, a barrier that kept the great civilizations of the West and the East apart. This documentary will investigate the revolutionary technological and intellectual breakthrough that finally solved that puzzle, the discovery and mastery of the monsoon wind system. We will argue that this was not merely an improvement in navigation, it was a disruptive innovation on par with the invention of the steam engine or the internet. The understanding of these predictable, seasonal reversing winds was a key that unlocked the ocean, transforming it from a coastal backwater into the world's first truly global marketplace. Our investigation will chart the course of this new wind-powered economy. We will explore the massive Roman infrastructure investment in the Red Sea ports, the state-sponsored effort to cut out the middlemen and seize control of this lucrative trade. We will journey to the mythical Spice Coast of southern India, the epicenter of the pepper trade, and uncover the immense hoards of Roman gold that are the stunning proof of this commercial explosion. We will reveal the forgotten third power in this equation, the African kingdom of Axum, which became a vital hub in this new hemispheric network. We will deconstruct the cargo of empires, the spices, gems, and silks that flowed west, and the river of gold, wine, and glass that flowed east. And we will explore how this new direct connection between worlds fostered an unprecedented exchange of not just goods, but of people, ideas, and cultures. This is the story of how a secret held in the wind shattered an ancient monopoly, created a truly hemispheric economy, and laid the foundations for the interconnected world we inhabit today. Before the great age of open ocean sailing, the Indian Ocean was a world of immense potential but profound limitation. It was a vast, warm sea, bordered by some of the richest and most diverse cultures on Earth. The industrial and military might of the Roman Empire in the west, the ancient and wealthy kingdoms of India in the east, and the powerful aromatic lands of Arabia and the Horn of Africa in between. The desire for exchange was immense. The Romans craved the spices, gems, and exotic materials of the east. The Indians and Arabs desired the gold, wine, and manufactured goods of the west. But the ocean itself, or rather the human understanding of it, placed a hard limit on this potential. The early economy of the Indian Ocean was a slow, inefficient, and deeply fragmented system, a world defined by the tyranny of the coastline and the iron grip of a powerful monopoly. The dominant mode of travel in this early period was a technique known as coastal crawling. Sailors in their small, square-rigged ships would timidly hug the shoreline, navigating by sight from one landmark to the next. The open ocean was a terrifying void, a place of monsters and myth to be avoided at all costs. A journey from a Roman port in Egypt to the mouth of the Indus River was not a direct voyage. It was an excruciatingly long and complex series of short hops. A ship would sail down the Red Sea, turn east, and then meticulously follow the convoluted, thousands of miles long coastline of Arabia, Persia, and what is now Pakistan. A single, one-way journey could take a year or even two to complete. This slow, high-cost, high-risk model of transport meant that only the most valuable, low-weight luxury goods were worth carrying. The dream of a high-volume, mass-market trade between the great empires was a logistical and economic impossibility. This fragmented and inefficient system was the perfect environment for the rise of the middlemen, and in the Indian Ocean, the undisputed masters of this role were the kingdoms of southern Arabia, the region known to the Romans as Arabia Felix, or Fortunate Arabia. These were the kingdoms that controlled the legendary incense route, the source of the world's supply of frankincense and myrrh. Their strategic position at the southwestern tip of the Arabian Peninsula gave them a commanding geographical advantage. They were the natural gatekeepers, the pivot point between the Mediterranean world to their west and the Indian world to their east, and they exploited this position with brilliant commercial acumen. The Arab merchants became the great accumulators and distributors of the world's luxuries. They used their own fleets to conduct the slow coastal trade with India, bringing back the pepper of the Malabar coast, the pearls of the Persian Gulf, and the gems of Sri Lanka. These goods would arrive at their great port cities like Udaiman, modern Aden. Here, the goods would be consolidated with their own immensely profitable exports of incense. Then, they controlled the final lucrative leg of the journey to the Roman market. They would either ship the goods up the Red Sea, a route they dominated, or send them overland via the great camel caravans of the incense route. Critically, they maintained their monopoly by jealously guarding the secret of their sources. They were the sole conduit of information between the East and the West. They told the Romans terrifying stories of the dangers of the journey to India, of monstrous sea creatures and treacherous waters, actively discouraging any Roman merchant from attempting to bypass them. They controlled the market by controlling both goods and information. This allowed them to purchase goods at a low price in the East and sell them for an astronomical markup in the West, creating a river of wealth that made their kingdoms legendary. For the Roman economy, this was a source of immense frustration. They were paying an enormous premium for every peppercorn and every pearl, their gold flowing into the coffers of a foreign monopoly. The Roman state was desperate for a solution, a way to break the stranglehold of the middlemen and forge a direct, profitable connection to the riches of the East. The solution would not be found in a new ship, but in a new idea, a secret hidden in the seasonal patterns of the wind.
For centuries, the Indian Ocean had been a puzzle, its commerce locked in the slow, inefficient embrace of the coastline. The solution to this puzzle, the key that would finally unlock the ocean's true potential, was not a new kind of ship or a new instrument of navigation. It was an idea. It was the understanding and the daring exploitation of one of the planet's great meteorological phenomena, the monsoon. The word monsoon comes from the Arabic mausim, meaning season, and for the sailors of the Indian Ocean, the seasons of the wind were the most powerful and important force in their world. The systematic mastery of this highway of wind was the single greatest breakthrough in the history of maritime trade, a discovery that would shatter the old coastal monopoly and transform the ocean into a vast, predictable, and incredibly profitable marketplace. The science behind the monsoon system is a beautiful and powerful piece of planetary physics. It is all driven by the differential heating of the massive Asian landmass and the vast Indian Ocean. During the summer, the continent heats up much faster than the ocean. This creates a vast area of low atmospheric pressure over the land. The cooler, denser, moisture-laden air from the ocean then rushes in to fill this void, creating the powerful, steady, and predictable southwestern monsoon winds that blow from the coast of Africa towards the coast of India. Then, in the winter, the process reverses. The landmass cools down much faster than the ocean, creating a zone of high pressure. Now, the wind direction flips 180 degrees, and the cool, dry, northeastern monsoon winds blow steadily from India back towards Africa. This was a perfect, natural, reversible engine for sailing. It was a wind system that guaranteed a fast, reliable, one-way journey to India in the summer, and a fast, reliable, one-way journey home in the winter. For a sailor with a square-rigged ship, this was a gift from the gods. It meant that for the first time, a captain could leave the safety of the coast, abandon the timid practice of crawling, and sail with confidence directly across the open ocean. A journey that had once taken years of painstaking coastal navigation could now be completed in a matter of months. The knowledge of these winds was not a single sudden discovery. The local sailors of the Arabian Sea, the Arabs, the Indians, the Ethiopians, had likely understood the patterns of the monsoons for centuries, using them for regional trade. But this was a closely guarded secret, the intellectual property of the middlemen who profited from the slow, coastal system. The revolutionary moment came when this local knowledge was broken open and systematically exploited by the great economic superpower of the West, the Roman Empire. The story of this breakthrough is famously, if perhaps apocryphally, attributed to a single Greek sailor named Hippalus around the 1st century BC or AD. According to the ancient text, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a mariner's handbook from the 1st century AD, it was Hippalus who first discovered the route across the open ocean by observing the patterns of the winds and the practices of the local traders. While Hippalus was likely not a lone genius, he was probably the first to systematize and popularize knowledge gained from Indian or Arab pilots. His name became forever associated with this great leap forward. The southwestern monsoon was, for a time, even known as the Hippalus wind. This was more than just a new route, it was a complete disruption of the existing economic order. The mastery of the monsoon was a weapon, an instrument that could be used to shatter the long-standing Arab monopoly on the eastern trade. A Roman ship could now bypass the heavily controlled southern Arabian ports entirely. A captain could sail from a Roman port on the Red Sea, catch the summer monsoon off the Horn of Africa, and arrive in the spice markets of India in as little as 40 days of open ocean sailing. He could conduct his business, wait for the winds to reverse in the winter, and make the return journey home, completing a full round trip in under a year. The economic consequences of this new efficiency were staggering. The cost of transport plummeted, the speed of the journey increased tenfold, the volume of goods that could be moved exploded. Spices and luxuries that had once been the exclusive domain of emperors and senators, trickling into the empire at immense cost, could now be imported in quantities large enough to supply a much broader market. The old economy of the Indian Ocean, a slow, cautious, and monopolized system, had been shattered. In its place, a new, dynamic, and far more competitive global marketplace was born. A marketplace powered not by the oar or the whim of a local chieftain, but by the predictable, powerful, and now decoded secret of the wind. The mastery of the monsoon was the key that unlocked the Indian Ocean. But a key is useless without a door, and a door is useless without a hallway that leads to the heart of the house. For the Roman Empire, the great prize of the Indian trade could only be realized if they could build a reliable and efficient logistical corridor to connect the Mediterranean world with this new highway of wind. The solution was a massive, state-sponsored infrastructure project on one of the most hostile frontiers of the empire, the eastern desert of Egypt. Here, at the edge of the Red Sea, the Romans established a series of remarkable port cities, most notably Berenice and Myos Hormos. These were not glamorous metropolises. They were gritty industrial hubs, the indispensable western terminus of the Monsoon Marketplace, and a testament to the Roman state's immense power and its unyielding determination to control this new global economy. When Rome conquered Egypt in 30 BC, after the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra, they did not just acquire a breadbasket, they acquired a strategic gateway to the east. The Ptolemaic kings who had ruled Egypt before them had already dabbled in the Red Sea trade, but it was the Romans, armed with the new knowledge of the monsoons and an insatiable appetite for luxury goods, who would supercharge the connection. The Emperor Augustus and his successors immediately recognized the immense strategic and economic potential. By creating a direct maritime link to India from their own Egyptian ports, they could finally bypass the two great middlemen who had been draining the empire's wealth for centuries: the Parthian Empire, which controlled the overland Silk Road, and the Arab kingdoms, which controlled the old coastal sea routes. This was an act of imperial economic policy, a deliberate and aggressive move to seize control of the entire supply chain from source to consumer. The geography of the region, however, presented an immense challenge. The Red Sea itself was notoriously difficult to navigate, with its treacherous reefs and unpredictable winds, particularly in its northern reaches. The most efficient route was to travel as far south as possible overland through the desert and then to embark from a port on the southern part of the Egyptian coast. This required the creation of a sophisticated overland supply chain, a desert road, to connect the Nile River, the great artery of Roman Egypt, to the sea. The Romans, the master road builders of the ancient world, met this challenge with their characteristic efficiency. They established a caravan route, a well-policed and well-supplied track that ran for over 100 miles through the barren, mountainous wastes of the eastern desert. Along this desert road, they built a series of fortified watering stations, or hydriamata, complete with deep wells and cisterns to capture the scant rainfall, and garrisons of Roman soldiers to protect the caravans from desert raiders. This was the lifeline that made the Red Sea ports possible. Great camel caravans, the same technology that powered the trans-Saharan trade, would be loaded with goods on the banks of the Nile River at a city like Koptos. They would carry southbound cargo for the Indian market, amphoras of Italian wine, crates of Roman glass, textiles, and above all, the vast quantities of gold and silver coins needed to pay for the eastern luxuries. For 2 weeks, these caravans would trudge across the desert, sustained by the Roman-built infrastructure, a river of commerce flowing through one of the driest places on earth. At the end of this desert road lay the ports themselves. Berenice and Myos Hormos were remarkable feats of engineering and logistics. They were artificial cities, built from scratch in a hostile environment for a single purpose. Archaeological excavations at these sites have revealed a bustling, cosmopolitan world. We find the remains of great harbor complexes, of temples dedicated to both Egyptian and Roman gods, and of the administrative buildings of the Roman customs officials who taxed every ounce of cargo that passed through. But most importantly, we find the artifacts of the trade itself: shards of Indian pottery, fragments of South Asian textiles, and even peppercorns and coconuts, the tangible, organic proof of the long-distance connection. These ports were true melting pots. Here, Roman and Greek captains would have rubbed shoulders with Arab pilots, Indian merchants, and Ethiopian traders. It was a place of immense activity, dictated by the rhythm of the monsoons. In the late summer, the great fleets, sometimes numbering over 100 ships in a single season, would depart, their sails full with the last of the favorable winds, bound for the distant markets of India. For the next several months, the ports would be quiet, waiting. Then, in the deep of winter, the lookouts would scan the horizon for the first sails of the returning fleet, their holds now laden with the treasures of the East. The arrival of the Pepper Fleet would have been a moment of immense excitement and relief.
the successful culmination of a year-long, high-risk and incredibly profitable enterprise. From here, the spices and luxuries would be loaded onto the camels for the arduous journey back to the Nile, and from there into the waiting markets of the insatiable Roman Empire.
The Roman fleets that sailed from the Red Sea were not venturing into a primitive wilderness. They were heading towards an ancient, wealthy, and highly sophisticated civilization at the far end of the Monsoon Highway. This was the world of the Tamilakam, the land of the three great crowned kings, the Cheras, the Cholas, and the Pandyas in southern India. This region, particularly the Malabar coast, was the epicenter of the global spice trade, the world's primary source for the most desirable commodity of all, black pepper. The Roman arrival did not create this economy, it simply tapped into a pre-existing, deeply sophisticated network of production and trade. The Tamil kingdoms were not passive producers of raw materials, they were powerful and discerning business partners who grew fabulously wealthy from their commercial engagement with the Roman Empire. The great prize of the region was black pepper, Piper nigrum, a climbing vine native to the lush, tropical monsoonal forests of the Western Ghats. The Romans called it piper, and they were utterly obsessed with it. It was the ultimate spice, a versatile and potent flavor that could be used in both savory and sweet dishes, and it also held a high value in ancient medicine. Unlike the chili peppers of the New World, which were unknown, black pepper provided a unique and desirable pungency. But its production was geographically limited, and its cultivation was a skilled art. This natural monopoly on the world's most sought-after spice made the kings of the Malabar coast the masters of a commodity as valuable as the oil of Athens or the silk of China. The central hub of this vibrant international trade, the primary destination for the Roman fleets, was the legendary and now lost port city of Muziris. The periplus of the Erythraean Sea and other ancient sources describe Muziris in breathless terms. It was a bustling, cosmopolitan metropolis, a place abounding in ships sent from Arabia and by the Greeks. It was the great clearinghouse where the pepper, harvested in the hills, was brought to be traded. But Muziris was more than just a pepper port. It was the nexus for all the luxuries of the East. From here, goods from even further afield were consolidated and re-exported to the West. Pearls from Sri Lanka, precious gems like beryls and diamonds from the Indian interior, and even bales of Chinese silk that had made their own arduous journey southwards to be loaded onto the ships bound for Rome. What is most remarkable is the sheer, undeniable physical proof of the scale of this trade. For centuries, all we had were the textual accounts, but in the 20th and 21st centuries, archaeologists in southern India have unearthed a treasure trove of Roman artifacts. Most spectacularly, they have discovered massive hoards of Roman gold and silver coins, literally thousands upon thousands of them, buried in terracotta pots. These are not just a few stray coins lost by a traveler. These are the vast, accumulated payments for the spices and luxuries sent to Rome, a stunning, tangible record of the immense trade imbalance. The Roman Empire was literally hemorrhaging its gold to pay for its pepper addiction, and these hoards are the receipts. The presence of these coins tells a sophisticated story. The Romans were not plundering India, they were engaging in a balanced and very expensive commercial exchange. The Tamil kingdoms were not naive natives being duped out of their resources. They were powerful rulers who demanded payment in the most stable and trusted currency of the age, Roman gold and silver. They understood the global economy. The coins were not just melted down, their high-quality metal was valued, and they often circulated as a form of local currency or were stored in royal treasuries as a measure of the kingdom's wealth. The connection was more than just commercial, it was cultural. The periplus speaks of a temple dedicated to the Roman Emperor Augustus at Muziris, a clear sign of a large, permanent, and respected community of expatriate Roman traders living in the city. Tamil poetry from the period, the Sangam literature, speaks of the cool, fragrant wine brought by the Yavanas, their name for the peoples of the West, in their great ships. It was a relationship of mutual fascination and immense mutual profit. The Roman traders who made the perilous one-year-long round trip to India were not just sailors, they were diplomats, adventurers, and the human conduits of the first great age of globalization.
This was a partnership of equals. The Tamil kingdoms were a sophisticated, literate society with their own powerful navies and a long tradition of maritime trade. They controlled the production of a commodity the world's greatest superpower desperately wanted, and they used that leverage to extract a mountain of gold and silver, making their own kingdoms fabulously wealthy and cosmopolitan. The story of the Spice Coast is a vital counter-narrative to the idea of a purely Roman-dominated world. It reveals that the Monsoon Marketplace was not a one-way street of Western exploitation, but a dynamic, balanced, and incredibly profitable economy that profoundly enriched both ends of the Great Highway.
The Monsoon Marketplace was a system of breathtaking scale, a network that connected the economies of 3 continents. The ships that plied these routes were floating treasure chests, their holds packed with the most valuable, the most exotic, and the most sought-after commodities of the ancient world. The cargo of the Indian Ocean trade was a vibrant and often surprising catalog of the desires, the needs, and the industrial outputs of the great civilizations of the age. It was a two-way street, a dynamic exchange where the raw luxuries of the East were traded for the manufactured goods and the hard currency of the West. To unpack the hold of a single one of these merchant ships is to dissect the entire global economy in miniature. The primary cargo flowing from east to west, the commodity that gave the trade its name and its primary driving force, was spices. At the absolute top of the list was black pepper from the Malabar coast. But it was far from the only one. From India also came ginger, cardamom, and turmeric. From the islands of Indonesia, the so-called Spice Islands, the Moluccas, came the even more valuable and exotic cloves, nutmeg, and mace, which would have been brought to the Indian ports by Southeast Asian sailors and then re-exported to the West. For the Romans, whose own cuisine was relatively limited in its flavor palette, these spices were a culinary revelation, a way to add heat, fragrance, and complexity to their dishes. Their immense value was a direct function of their rarity and the incredible distances they had to travel. They were, in essence, edible jewels. After spices, the most important exports from the East were gemstones and pearls. India, particularly the region of the Deccan Plateau, was a legendary source of precious stones. Beryls, a category that included the highly prized aquamarine, were a major export. Diamonds, still a rarity in the West, were another. From the island of Sri Lanka, known to the Romans as Taprobane, came not only gems but also the finest pearls in the world. The Persian Gulf was another major source of high-quality pearls. These gems were the ultimate status symbols for the Roman elite, a way to display wealth in its most concentrated and beautiful form. The demand was so great that Roman moralists complained that the fortunes of entire families were being spent on a single string of Indian pearls for a senator's wife. Other luxury goods filled the holds. Fine, translucent cotton textiles, particularly muslins from the Ganges Delta, were a major Indian export, prized for their lightness and comfort. A more surprising and incredibly valuable commodity was Chinese silk. While the Silk Road is famous as an overland route, a huge and ever-increasing amount of Chinese silk was also transported by sea. It would be brought by traders down through Southeast Asia to the ports of India, where it was then re-shipped and loaded onto the Roman-bound vessels. For a Roman merchant, a single cargo that included both Indian pepper and Chinese silk was the ultimate prize, a fortune beyond imagining. To complete the exotic manifest, there were strange and wonderful animal products, ivory from Africa and India, tortoiseshell, and even live animals like parrots and peacocks destined for the villas of the super-rich. To pay for this immense river of Eastern luxuries, a corresponding river of Western wealth had to flow in the opposite direction, and the single most important Roman export to the East was money itself. The hordes of thousands of Roman gold and silver coins found in India are the starkest proof of the trade imbalance. The Roman economy was, in a sense, hemorrhaging its hard currency to pay for its addiction to spices. These coins were valued not just for their symbolic power, but for the consistent purity of their metal, making them a trusted store of value and a preferred medium of exchange in the Indian kingdoms.
But the Romans did not only pay in cash, they also exported their own high-value manufactured goods. One of the most prized of these was Roman glass. The Romans had perfected the art of glassblowing, creating beautiful, clear, and complex vessels that were a technological marvel. Finely made Roman glass bowls, flasks, and drinking cups were highly sought after by the elites of India, and fragments of them have been found in the ruins of the ancient trading ports. Another major export was wine. The fine wines of Italy, particularly from the regions of Campania, were famous throughout the Mediterranean, and they found an eager market among the rulers of the East. Large quantities of wine, transported in massive clay amphora, made the long journey to India a taste of the Mediterranean good life. Other Roman exports included fine red-glazed pottery known as Aretine ware, bronze and lead for industrial use, and certain types of high-quality textiles, like fine linen. This was a complex and sophisticated trade, a true exchange of the unique products of different global zones. The ships that sailed the Monsoon Marketplace were not just carrying goods, they were carrying the very essence of their home civilizations, creating a vibrant, interconnected, and truly globalized economic world.
The story of the Monsoon Marketplace is often told as a simple bipolar exchange between two giants, the Roman Empire in the west and the wealthy kingdoms of India in the east. But this narrative misses a crucial third player, a powerful and sophisticated African kingdom that had positioned itself as the strategic pivot point of the entire system. This was the Kingdom of Aksum, located in the highlands of modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea. With its great port city of Adulis on the Red Sea, Aksum was not just a participant in the Indian Ocean trade. It was a major commercial power in its own right, a vital hub that controlled the flow of Africa's unique and immensely valuable resources into the global economy. The story of Aksum is the forgotten chapter of the monsoon trade, a testament to an African civilization that harnessed the winds of commerce to build an empire. The Kingdom of Aksum rose to prominence in the first centuries of the Common Era, perfectly timed to capitalize on the explosion of trade that followed the Roman mastery of the monsoons. Its geographical position was its greatest asset. The Aksumite heartland was in the cool, fertile highlands of the Horn of Africa, but its power projected down to the coast, to its great port of Adulis. Adulis was strategically located near the Bab el-Mandeb, the narrow strait that connects the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. This meant that almost every single ship sailing from Roman Egypt to India, and vice versa, had to pass directly by its shores. Aksum was the gatekeeper of the western entrance to the Monsoon Marketplace. This position allowed the Aksumites to play a dual role in the economy. First, they were facilitators and intermediaries. Their port at Adulis became a vital stopping point for the Roman fleets. Here, ships could take on fresh water and supplies, repair their rigging, and hire local pilots with an intimate knowledge of the Red Sea's treacherous currents and reefs. This made Adulis an indispensable service station for the long-haul trade, a role for which the Aksumite state would have extracted significant port duties and taxes. The city grew into a bustling, cosmopolitan hub, a place where, as the Periplus describes, one could find traders from Rome, Arabia, and India, all doing business. But the Aksumites were far more than just the proprietors of a port. Their second and more important role was as the primary suppliers of a host of uniquely African commodities that were in high demand across the ancient world. Their greatest and most valuable export was ivory. The African elephant, with its massive tusks of high-quality, hard ivory, was the world's prized source of this luxury material. Aksumite traders and hunters would procure the tusks from the interior of the continent, a perilous and difficult enterprise, and bring them to Adulis. From there, the ivory would be shipped to the workshops of the Roman Empire, where it was carved into everything from the decorative panels on furniture to the intricate statues of the gods and the ceremonial scepters of consuls. The demand for ivory was immense, and Aksum's control over its supply was a source of almost unbelievable wealth. But the list of African exports went on. The Periplus details the immense variety of goods that flowed out of the port of Adulis. Tortoiseshell, particularly from the giant tortoises of the region, was a highly prized luxury good, used for inlays and the creation of ornate veneers. Rhinoceros horn was another valuable commodity, believed to have medicinal properties. And critically, Aksum became a major player in the ancient incense trade. While the kingdoms of southern Arabia controlled the finest frankincense and myrrh, the Horn of Africa produced its own varieties, and Aksum became a major consolidator and exporter of these aromatic resins. The Aksumite state was a sophisticated and powerful state, fully capable of managing its role in this complex economy. They were one of the few African kingdoms of the period to develop their own written script, Ge'ez. And in a stunning display of their commercial ambition, they became the first sub-Saharan African state to issue its own coinage. Beginning in the late 3rd century AD, the kings of Aksum issued a beautiful and sophisticated tri-metallic currency in gold, silver, and bronze. These coins, often inscribed in Greek, the international language of commerce, were a clear statement of their sovereignty and their full participation in the Roman and Indian economic sphere. They were not a barbarian periphery, they were a peer, a civilization that understood and used the international language of money. The kingdom of Aksum, therefore, was the vital third pillar of the Monsoon Marketplace. It was the great bridge that connected the resources of the African interior with the global maritime network. The wealth they accumulated from the trade in ivory, incense, and other goods allowed them to build a powerful military, to create magnificent monuments like their famous towering stone stele, and to become a major regional power that would, at times, even project its influence across the Red Sea into Arabia itself. The story of the Indian Ocean trade is incomplete without them, a powerful reminder that Africa was not a passive subject of the global economy, but an active, powerful, and incredibly wealthy participant.
The Monsoon Marketplace was an engine of unprecedented prosperity, a system that generated immense wealth for the merchants and empires that participated in it. But this wealth was not distributed equally, and the very success of the trade created a profound and persistent economic anxiety in the heart of its greatest consumer, the Roman Empire. While Roman citizens enjoyed a spectacular influx of spices, silks, and other exotic luxuries, Roman intellectuals and officials watched with growing alarm as a torrent of the empire's most precious resource, its gold and silver coinage, flowed inexorably eastwards to pay for it. The story of Rome's trade deficit is one of the most fascinating and surprisingly modern-sounding economic debates of the ancient world, a clear sign that the monsoon trade was not just enriching the West, but was fundamentally empowering the economies of the East. The problem was a simple, classic imbalance of trade. The Roman Empire, with its vast, wealthy, and sophisticated consumer class, had an almost insatiable appetite for the high-value, low-bulk luxury goods of India, Arabia, and the Far East. As we have seen, they craved pepper, spices, gems, pearls, and the fine textiles of cotton and silk. These were the ultimate status symbols, the must-have items for any Roman of means. The problem was that the Romans produced very few tangible goods that the East wanted in return, at least not in a quantity or value that could match their own consumption. The result was a massive structural trade deficit. The value of the goods being imported from the East was far greater than the value of the goods being exported. So how was this enormous gap to be paid for? The answer was simple: hard currency. The Roman Empire had to pay for its luxury addiction in cash, using its universally accepted and high-purity gold and silver coinage. Every single year, a fleet of ships would leave the Red Sea ports, their holds not just filled with wine and glass, but also with massive, heavily guarded chests filled with millions of gold aurei and silver denarii. This was not a sustainable model, and the thinkers of the day knew it. The most vocal of these critics was once again the encyclopedist Pliny the Elder. Writing in the 1st century AD, he acted as a modern-day financial commentator, lamenting what he saw as a catastrophic drain on the nation's wealth. He famously calculated the annual cost of this trade imbalance, stating that in no year does India drain our empire of less than 55 million sesterces, giving back her own wares in exchange, which is sold among us at fully 100 times their prime cost. He saw this as not a fair trade, but a disastrous economic hemorrhage, a river of Roman gold flowing to foreign lands in exchange for what he considered frivolous, effeminate luxuries. He complained that this money was being squandered on a dead stock of pearls and spices, things that were consumed and disappeared, unlike land or property. This was more than just an economic argument, it was a moral one. For traditionalists like Pliny, the trade deficit was a symptom of a deeper Roman sickness, a decline in the old, austere republican virtues, and a rise in decadent, foreign-inspired consumerism. The desire for Indian pepper and Chinese silk was seen as a form of moral weakness, a corrupting influence that was making the Roman elite soft and effeminate. The flight of Roman gold was not just a balance of payments crisis, it was the price of the empire's moral decay. But was this view correct? While the gold drain was undeniably real, the immense hoards of Roman coins found in India are the physical proof. The idea that it was crippling the Roman economy is likely an exaggeration. The Roman Empire was an economic behemoth. The amount of gold flowing east, while enormous, was still likely only a small fraction of the state's total economic output. The state itself profited immensely from the trade, levying a heavy 25% tax on all goods passing through its Red Sea ports. This tax revenue alone would have offset a significant portion of the currency outflow. Furthermore, the idea that this trade was unproductive is a fundamental misunderstanding of a consumer economy. It created a massive and highly profitable industry of its own. It employed thousands of sailors, merchants, shipbuilders, caravan drivers, and port workers. It fueled the growth of entire cities, from the Red Sea ports to the great commercial hubs of Alexandria and Rome itself. And the influx of luxury goods, while perhaps frivolous in the eyes of a moralist, was a key part of the social and political fabric of the empire, a way for the elite to display their status and for the state to project an image of immense, world-spanning power. The most profound consequence of this trade imbalance, however, was not the weakening of Rome, but the immense strengthening of the economies of the East. The massive annual influx of Roman hard currency was a colossal economic stimulus to the Tamil kingdoms of India and the Aksumite kingdom in Africa. It provided them with the capital to build their own cities, to fund their own armies, and to develop their own sophisticated state structures. The Monsoon Marketplace was not a colonial exploitation system. It was a dynamic and relatively balanced global economy that for a few centuries created a period of immense shared prosperity, a golden age of ancient trade that enriched and empowered every civilization it touched.
The Monsoon Marketplace was, at its heart, an economic machine, a vast system for moving goods and generating profit. But the ships that plied the Indian Ocean, their holds filled with the material desires of empires, carried a second, invisible cargo. This was a cargo of people, of ideas, of cultures, and of faiths. The highway of wind was also a highway of the mind. The same predictable currents that carried pepper and gold also carried merchants, diplomats, missionaries, and pilgrims. The creation of this direct, reliable connection between the Roman West, Africa, and the Indian East fostered an unprecedented level of human and cultural exchange, a vibrant cross-pollination that would leave a permanent and often surprising mark on the civilizations at both ends of the trade route. The most tangible evidence of this human exchange is the presence of expatriate communities in the great trading ports. As we have seen, the periplus of the Erythraean Sea and Tamil literature speak of the Yavanas, the Westerners, primarily Greeks and Romans, living in cities like Muziris. These were not just temporary visitors, they were established communities of merchants, agents, and sailors who lived year-round in India, managing the complex logistics of the trade. The mention of a temple dedicated to the Emperor Augustus at Muziris is a stunning piece of evidence. It suggests a community that was large enough, wealthy enough, and confident enough to build its own major place of worship, a permanent outpost of Roman culture on the shores of India. Likewise, evidence from the Roman port of Berenice on the Red Sea shows the presence of Indian traders who brought their own culture and even their own religious practices to the heart of the Roman logistical hub. This regular, predictable contact also opened the door for the first time to formal diplomatic relations. The civilizations were no longer mythical, distant lands to one another. They were real, tangible, and immensely important economic partners. The Roman Emperor Augustus, the architect of the new imperial system, seems to have been particularly fascinated by the potential of the Indian connection. The Roman historian Strabo, a contemporary, records with a sense of immense pride that while he was in Egypt, he witnessed the arrival of embassies from the Indians. He notes that these diplomatic missions, sent by powerful kings from the subcontinent, were a new and unprecedented phenomenon. This was not just trade, it was international diplomacy. The kings of India were sending their representatives to the court of the Caesar, a clear sign that the Monsoon Marketplace was creating a new, interconnected geopolitical world. Perhaps the most enduring and profound of these cultural exchanges was the transmission of religion. Just as the Silk Road became the great artery for the spread of Buddhism to the east, the maritime routes of the Indian Ocean became the conduits for the spread of new faiths in all directions. One of the most powerful and ancient traditions of the St. Thomas Christians of Kerala in southern India is that their community was founded by none other than St. Thomas the Apostle himself, who, according to the tradition, sailed to India in the 1st century AD to preach the gospel. While the historical details are debated, the story's underlying premise is perfectly plausible. The established, busy trade route between the Levant, Egypt, and the Malabar coast was the ideal and most logical pathway for an early Christian missionary to have taken. The faith followed the flag of commerce. The transmission went in the other direction as well. The presence of Indian traders in Roman Egypt and the close contact between the two cultures led to a new level of fascination with Indian philosophy and religion in the West. We see a new awareness of Hindu gods, of the concept of reincarnation, and of the ascetic practices of Indian holy men beginning to filter into the Greek and Roman intellectual world. Even Buddhism, which had primarily traveled east, also found a westward path. The great Buddhist emperor of India, Ashoka, had sent missionaries to the west centuries earlier, and the monsoon routes would have provided a new and more direct channel for the flow of these ideas. This was not a one-way transmission of superior Western culture to the East, or vice versa. It was a true, dynamic, and multi-directional exchange, a conversation between great and ancient civilizations. The merchants and sailors, who were the engines of the economy, were also its primary cultural ambassadors. A Roman captain who spent months in an Indian port would have learned something of the local language, the local customs, and the local beliefs. An Indian merchant living in Berenice would have brought his own worldview to the heart of the Roman Empire. This constant, human-level interaction, repeated thousands of times over the centuries, was the true, deep legacy of the Monsoon Marketplace. It was a system that did not just enrich the treasuries of kings, but also enriched the very fabric of human culture, weaving the disparate threads of the ancient world into a new, more complex, and truly global tapestry.
The Roman-Indian trade, powered by the monsoon winds, was a system of immense profitability and surprising stability that lasted for centuries. But no golden age lasts forever. The catastrophic decline and eventual fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries AD was a political and economic earthquake that sent shockwaves across the entire ancient world. The great consumer market at the western end of the line, with its insatiable appetite for luxuries and its seemingly endless supply of gold, began to crumble. But the Monsoon Marketplace did not collapse. The highway of wind was too powerful, its logic too compelling. The system did not die, it adapted. The decline of Rome did not create a vacuum, but a power shift, a new era in which the great middlemen of the trade, the Persian Sasanian Empire and the African kingdom of Aksum, rose from being powerful participants to become the new masters of the Indian Ocean economy. The decline of the Western Roman Empire was a slow and agonizing process. The crisis of the 3rd century, with its civil wars and hyperinflation, had already severely weakened the Roman consumer economy. As the empire fragmented and its western provinces fell to barbarian invasions, the old, unified, luxury-loving aristocratic class was decimated. The demand for Indian pepper and gems did not disappear entirely, but it shrank dramatically. The new Germanic kings of Italy and Gaul had neither the wealth nor the sophisticated tastes of the Roman senators they had replaced. The river of gold and silver that had once flowed from Rome to pay for the Eastern trade slowed to a trickle. But Rome had not completely fallen. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered on the magnificent new capital of Constantinople, survived and even thrived. This Byzantine Empire, with its own wealthy elite and its strategic position at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, became the new primary consumer for the goods of the East. The trade continued, but its scale was reduced, and its primary destination had shifted. The great Red Sea ports of Egypt, now under Byzantine control, continued to operate, but at a diminished capacity. The old Roman-dominated, state-sponsored system was weakening, creating a power vacuum in the waters of the Indian Ocean. Into this vacuum stepped the two powers that were perfectly positioned to exploit it. The first was the Sasanian Empire of Persia. The Sasanians had long been the great rivals of Rome, and they had always been frustrated by the Roman maritime trade, which had so cleverly bypassed their own overland routes. As Byzantine power at sea wavered, the Sasanians, with their long coastline on the Persian Gulf, saw their opportunity. They became a major naval power in their own right, their ships taking on an ever larger share of the trade with India. They became the new great middlemen, buying spices and silks from Indian merchants and then selling them at a high profit to the Byzantine Empire, effectively re-establishing the middleman monopoly that the Romans had worked so hard to break centuries before. The second and equally important power to rise in this new era was the African kingdom of Aksum. As we have seen, Aksum had always been a key player, the gatekeeper of the Red Sea. As Roman and Byzantine influence in the southern seas waned, Aksum's power grew. Their great king, Ezana, who famously converted the kingdom to Christianity in the 4th century, presided over a golden age of Aksumite power. Their navy dominated the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa. At times, their military power was so great that they were able to project it across the sea, seizing direct control of southern Arabia and seizing direct control of the incense trade. For a time, Aksum and Persia became the two great rival superpowers of the Indian Ocean economy, each vying for control of the lucrative routes. This new post-Roman system is beautifully illustrated by a 6th century text, the Christian topography of Cosmas Indicopleustes. Cosmas was a merchant turned monk who had personally traveled the Red Sea and Indian Ocean routes. He describes a world where the primary long-distance traders are no longer the Greeks and Romans, but the Persians and the Aksumites. He details how Aksumite ships laden with African ivory would sail to India and how Persian ships dominated the silk trade. He paints a picture of a vibrant, interconnected, and highly competitive marketplace, a world in which the old Roman dominance was now just a fading memory.
This era, a golden age for the Persian and Axumite middlemen, would itself be brought to an end by the next great world-changing event, the rise of Islam in the 7th century. The Arab conquests would once again redraw the entire map, with the new Islamic Caliphate seizing control of Egypt, the Levant, and Persia. This would create a single, unified Islamic economic zone that stretched from the Atlantic to the borders of India, ushering in a new and even more expansive chapter in the history of the Indian Ocean. But the fundamental logic of the system, the Great Highway of Wind, remained. The Monsoon Marketplace, first systematically exploited by the Romans, had proven itself to be a force of nature, a system so powerful and so profitable that it would outlast the fall of empires, adapting and evolving as new masters rose to harness its incredible power.
Our investigation began with a single, humble peppercorn, a spice that held a value equivalent to gold. We sought to understand the vast and complex system that carried this black gold from the forests of India to the tables of Rome. Having journeyed from the inefficient, timid world of coastal trawling through the revolutionary discovery of the monsoon winds and into the bustling, cosmopolitan ports of 3 continents, the evidence is now clear and the verdict can be rendered. The mastery of the monsoon wind system was a technological and intellectual breakthrough of the highest order. It transformed the Indian Ocean from a series of fragmented regional ponds into the world's first great, predictable, and truly hemispheric marketplace, creating a globalized economy that would connect the fates of Europe, Africa, and Asia for 1,000 years. We have established that the pre-monsoon world was a slow, high-cost system, its trade choked by the tyranny of the coastline and monopolized by powerful middlemen in southern Arabia. The central problem was not a lack of desire, but a lack of a means to reliably and efficiently cross the open ocean. Our investigation has shown that the Monsoon Code, the systematic understanding and exploitation of the seasonal reversing winds, was the key that unlocked this puzzle. This was a revolutionary piece of technology, a highway of wind, that allowed for the first time for fast, predictable, and high-volume open ocean sailing. This innovation shattered the old monopolies and dramatically lowered the cost of international trade. We have charted the new interconnected world that this highway created. We have seen how the Roman Empire, as the great Western consumer, made massive infrastructure investments in its Red Sea ports, a state-sponsored effort to seize control of this new global supply chain. We have traveled to the eastern anchor, the Spice Coast of India, and found the spectacular hoards of Roman gold that are the irrefutable proof of a massive and balanced commercial exchange with the powerful Tamil kingdoms. And we have uncovered the vital role of the forgotten kingdom of Axum, a sophisticated African power that became the indispensable third pillar of this new global economy. Finally, we have demonstrated the incredible resilience of this system. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the Indian Ocean Monsoon Marketplace did not die. It adapted. Its center of gravity shifted, and the great middlemen of Persia and Axum rose to become its new masters, a testament to the enduring power and profitability of the network. Therefore, the final conclusion of our investigation is this: the Indian Ocean Monsoon Marketplace was the true cradle of the global economy. Predating the European Age of Discovery by well over a millennium, it was a sophisticated, stable, and incredibly profitable system that integrated the economic destinies of the 3 great centers of ancient civilization. The discovery of how to ride the wind was the single most important event in the history of ancient trade, an innovation that created a world that was, for the first time, truly and permanently interconnected. The Roman galleys have long since rotted away. The great port of Muziris has been lost to the shifting coastlines of time, and the kingdom of Axum is a legend in the Ethiopian highlands. The specific actors and empires that first harnessed the power of the monsoon winds are gone, but the wind itself endures.
The seasonal, life-giving pulse of the Indian Ocean monsoon continues to this day, a timeless planetary engine. The story of the Monsoon Marketplace is the story of how a single brilliant insight, the decoding of this natural engine, unleashed one of the most powerful and creative forces in human history: globalization. The legacy of this great economy is all around us. It is in the spices on our shelves, the interconnected shipping lanes that power our modern world, and the enduring cultural ties that bind the continents. It is a story that proves that the greatest leaps forward in human history are often not about conquering new lands, but about seeing the world we already inhabit with new eyes, of finding a hidden pattern and having the courage to set sail upon it. The wind that filled the sails of the first Roman ships to cross the Arabian Sea is the same wind that blows today, a permanent, powerful, and poetic reminder of the world's first great age of global trade.